Well, good morning, councillors and council staff and those joining us on live stream. Welcome to this special meeting of the Sunshine Coast Council today in Caloundra. In declaring the meeting open, I'd like to ask the Chamber to be upstanding, and Councillor Johnston will make an acknowledgement to the traditional custodians. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillors. The Sunshine Coast Council acknowledges the Sunshine Coast country, home of the Kabi people and the Jinabara peoples, the traditional custodians whose lands and waters we now share. We recognise that these have always been places of cultural, spiritual, social and economic significance. The traditional custodians' values are unique and ancient and enduring cultures, deepen and enrich the life of our community. We commit to working in partnership with the traditional custodians and the broader First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders community to support self-determination through economic and community development. Truth-telling is a significant part of our journey. We are committed to better understand the collective history of the Sunshine Coast and the experiences of the First Nations people. Legacy issues resulting from colonization are still experienced by traditional custodians and the First Nations people. We recognise our shared history and will continue to work in partnership to provide a foundation for building a shared future for the Kabi peoples and the Jinabara peoples. We wish to pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge this important role First Nations people continue to play within the Sunshine Coast community. Together we are all stronger, and this week we acknowledge NAIDOC Week. First Nations people are spiritually and culturally connected to this country. This country was crisscrossed by generations of brilliant nations. First Nations people were Australia's first explorers, first navigators, first engineers, first farmers, first botanists, first scientists, first diplomats, first astronomers and first artists. Was and always will be acknowledges that hundreds of nations and cultures covered this continent. We were managing the land, the biggest estate on earth, to sustainably provide for their future. NAIDOC 2020 invites all Australians to embrace the true history of this nation, a country which dates back thousands of generations. It's about seeing, hearing and learning the First Nations 65,000 plus year history of this country, which is Australia's history. We want all Australians to celebrate that we have the oldest continuing culture on the planet. Always was, always will be.
Well done. Thank you. Please be seated. Councillors, we have no apologies. I'm sure Councillor Babarowski will join us shortly. Item 3, in relation to informing of personal interest. Councillors, I'd like to draw to your attention that on the 12th of October 2020, amendments to the Local Government Act 2009 and the Local Government Regulation 2012 came into force. The amendments include the new Chapter 5B, which sets out new legislative requirements for dealing with councillor conflicts of interest in local government matters. These arrangements will apply as to how we manage such matters at this meeting. And to that point, councillors, I have some prescribed conflicts of interest I wish to inform the Chamber of. Councillors, under section 155 EL brackets 3 brackets B of the Local Government Act 2009, I notify that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in a matter associated with or impacting on the Sunshine Coast Airport. I should make the point, I know we're not discussing these today, but this is the first meeting post my declaration, so that's the purpose of doing it today. 1, the matter is or relates to a contract between the Sunshine Coast Council and the Sunshine Coast Airport Pty Limited, Palisade Investment Partners or LGIA Super for A, the supply of goods or services to Council, or B, the lease or sale of assets by Council, or 2, the matter is or relates to an application made to Council for the grant of a licence, permit, registration or approval or consideration of another matter under the Act if A, the application is made to the Council by Sunshine Coast Airport Pty Limited, Palisade Investment Partners and/or LGIA Super, or B, any parties nominated in 2A above makes or has made a written submission to Council in relation to the application before it was decided. I'm aware that matters associated with or impacting on the Sunshine Coast Airport, Sunshine Coast Airport Pty Limited, Palisade Investment Partners or LGIA Super are discussed or considered in the subject of decision making by Council and Council officers from time to time, and hence I'm notifying of my interest. As President of the Local Government Association of Queensland, LGAQ, I'm an employer representative director of LGIA Super, which holds a 50% interest in the Sunshine Coast Airport through its asset manager, Palisade Investment Partners. The President of the LGAQ has historically been nominated as a director of the Local Government Superannuation Scheme, and as such I have held the position of Director of LGIA Super since July 1, 2018. I receive remuneration for this role, and this is noted in my register of interests. And any decision making by Council or Council officers on matters specified in 1 or 2 above may be either beneficial or detrimental to the interests of Palisade Investment Partners, LGIA Super, or other entities with a shareholding in the Sunshine Coast Airport. Other entities with an interest in the Sunshine Coast Airport are Pinnacle Funds Services Limited as responsible entity for Palisade Investment Partners Diversified Infrastructure Fund Number 1, and Perpetual Trust Services Limited as responsible entity for Palisade Investment Partners Diversified Infrastructure Fund Number 2. In accordance with Section 155EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from any meeting or discussion or communication in relation to making a decision on this matter. Next item. Councillors. Under Section 150EL (3) of the Local Government Act 2009, I notify that I may have a prescribed conflict of interest in a matter associated with or impacting on the Dewporth Tavern, situated at 52 to 56 Dewporth Avenue, Maroochydore, if 1. The matter is or relates to a contract between Sunshine Coast Council and Dewporth Tavern or entities with an interest in the Dewporth Tavern, 4. A. The supply of goods or services for the Council, or B. The lease or sale of assets by Council, or 2. The matter is or relates to an application made to Council for the grant of a licence, permit, registration or approval, or consideration of another matter under an Act if A. The application is made to Council by any parties with an interest in the Dewporth, so interest in 1. The Dewporth Tavern Unit Trust, including MKRD Projects Proprietary Limited and MKRD Projects Unit Trust, 2. The Jamison Investments Queensland Proprietary Limited, and 3. The Mark Jamison Family Trust. Or B. Any parties nominated in 2A 1 to 3 inclusive makes or has made a written submission to the Council in relation to the application before it was decided. I'm aware that matters associated with or impacting on the Dewporth Tavern may be discussed, considered and the subject of decision making by Council and Council officers from time to time, hence I am notifying of my interest. Details of the nature of my prescribed conflict of interest are as follows. I am a shareholder and director of the Jamison Investments Queensland Proprietary Limited as trustee for the Mark Jamison Family Trust. The Mark Jamison Family Trust holds units in MKRD Projects Proprietary Limited, a corporation which fully owns MKRD Projects Unit Trust. The MKRD Projects Unit Trust holds a 55% interest in the Dewporth Tavern Unit Trust, which owns the Dewporth Tavern. I'm a director of MKRD Projects Proprietary Limited, the MKRD Projects Unit Trust and the Dewporth Tavern Unit Trust. These interests are all noted in my register of interests. Other entities with an interest in the Dewporth Tavern not nominated above are the Raw Group Properties Proprietary Limited, R&J Mill Family Trust, Ebstar Proprietary Limited, Debouche Proprietary Limited as trustee for the KC Guy Family Trust, and Rhinostro Proprietary Limited. Any decision made by Council, any decision making by Council or Council officers on matters specified in 1 and 2 above may be either beneficial or detrimental to the interests of any of the parties nominated in items 2A 1 to 3 above. In accordance with Section 150EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from any meeting, discussion or communication in relation to making a decision on matters relating to the Duplass Tavern. Next, councillors, under section 150EL3 in brackets 3 brackets B of the Local Government Act 2009, I notify that my wife, Laurel Jamieson, my daughter, Summer Jamieson, and myself have a prescribed conflict of interest in matters associated with the commercial property at 123 Mooloolaba Esplanade, Mooloolaba, if the matter is or relates to an application made to council for the grant of a licence, permit, registration or approval or consideration of another matter under the Act, insofar as it may relate solely, either beneficially or adversely, to this property, and if A, the application is made to council by any parties with an interest in 123 Mooloolaba Esplanade, Mooloolaba, including the M&L Super Fund, or any parties with an interest in 123 Mooloolaba Esplanade, Mooloolaba, including the M&L Super Fund, makes or has made a written submission to council in relation to the application before it is or was decided. I'm aware that matters associated with or impacting solely on the commercial property at 123 Mooloolaba Esplanade, Mooloolaba may be discussed and or considered and the subject of decision making by council and council officers from time to time, and hence I'm notifying of this interest. Details of my prescribed conflict of interest are as follows. My self-managed superannuation fund, the M&L Super Fund, owns a 25% interest in the property situated at 123 Mooloolaba Esplanade, Mooloolaba. The M&L Super Fund derives an investment return from this interest. The beneficiaries of the M&L Super Fund are Laurel Jamieson, Summer Jamieson and myself. The details of my self-managed super funds are noted in my register of interests. Other entities with an interest in the property situated at 123 Mooloolaba Esplanade, Mooloolaba are the D&D Family Trust, Ken Guy Proprietary Limited Superannuation Fund and Eb Star Proprietary Limited Staff Superannuation Fund. Any decision made by council or council officers on matters specified in this notification may be either beneficial or detrimental to the interests of the other entities nominated above, the M&L Super Fund, and ultimately myself, Laurel Jamieson, Summer Jamieson, given our interest in the M&L Super Fund. In accordance with section 150EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from that part of any meeting, discussion or communication in relation to making a decision which may solely, either beneficially or adversely, on 123 the Esplanade, Mooloolaba. Councillors, in relation to the agenda for 12 November 2020, agenda item 8.11, I give you notification of a prescribed conflict of interest. Under section 150EL brackets 3 brackets B of the Local Government Act 2009, I notify that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in agenda item 8.11 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on the 12th of November, due to the fact that one of the nominees for appointment has, as an independent member of the Sunshine Coast Council Audit Committee, Mr Mitchell Petrie is a member of the LGIA Super Audit and Risk Committee. In line with my previous declarations, the details of my prescribed conflict of interest are that as President of the Local Government Association of Queensland, LGAQ, I am an employee representative, Director of LGIA Super, which holds a 50% interest in the Sunshine Coast Airport through its asset manager, Palisade Investment Partners. The President of the LGAQ has historically been nominated as a Director of the Local Government Superannuation Scheme, and as such I have held the position as Director of LGIA Super since 1 July 2018. I receive remuneration for this role, and this is noted in my register of interests. In accordance with section 155EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from the meeting on 12 November 2020 while this matter is being discussed and the vote is being taken. Notification of a declarable conflict of interest, agenda item 8.3 at ordinary meeting on 12 November 2020. Councillors, under section 150EQ brackets 3 brackets C of the Local Government Act 2009, I notify that I have a declarable conflict of interest in agenda item 8.3 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on 12 November 2020 due to the fact that I received the following electoral donations: from RPS Australia, East Proprietary Limited, or entities associated with that organisation, $380 on the 18th of January 2012 from RPS Australia East Pty Limited, and $400 on the 11th of February 2016 from RPS Consultants. And 2 from Jerry O'Reilly, $1,800 on the 27th of January 2012. Each of these electoral donations were received outside of my relevant term as a councillor and therefore are not a prescribed conflict of interest. I have no ongoing relationship with RPS Australia East Pty Limited or its associated entities or Jerry O'Reilly beyond having received the electoral donations nominated above. In relation to the interest that is relevant to each of these parties in the context of the development application, which is the subject of agenda item 8.3, it is my understanding that RPS Australia East Pty Limited is a planning consultant to the applicant in the development application, and 2, Jerry O'Reilly is a member and shareholder of JK and CF O'Reilly Pty Limited, which is a member and ordinary shareholder of the applicant Forest Glen Village Centre Pty Limited. Pardon me. Given Jerry O'Reilly may stand to benefit or be disadvantaged as a result of the decision which Council will make on this agenda item, it is my intention to leave the chamber on 12 November 2020 and not participate in the deliberation on this matter or the vote. I also note that John and Gail Shadforth are members of the ordinary shareholders of the applicant Forest Glen Village Centre Pty Limited. I've conducted a number of company searches and it would appear that neither John nor Gail Shadforth are directors or members of Shadforth's or those of their associated entities which provided electoral donations to me in the lead up to the 2012 and 2016 local government elections. Based on the results of these searches, I'm satisfied that I have no declarable conflict of interest in relation to the interests of John and Gail Shadforth in the Forest Glen Village Centre Pty Limited. Thank you, councillors. So we'll go through any other councillors. Councillor Johnston.
If this is going to be normal, perhaps we could have a break for morning tea after we've done all the declarations. Mr Mayor, fellow councillors and council officers, I, Councillor Winston Johnson, notify that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 8.3, development application, including a variation request to establish the Forest Glen Village Centre Plan of Development to be considered at the ordinary meeting on 12th of November 2020 due to Mr Michael White of White's IGA as a member and shareholder of the applicant company Forest Glen Village Centre Pty Limited. Mr Michael White and Mrs Rosalind White are members and shareholders of M&R Super Trustee Proprietary Limited, which is a member and shareholder of Forest Glen Village Centre Pty Limited. Further, White's IGA is the proposed owner-tenant of the planned supermarket within the development. Mr and Mrs White are significant clients of Your Insurance Broker Proprietary Limited, and together with my wife Helen, we own a 10% shareholding in Your Insurance Broker. I am a director of Your Insurance Broker, but I do not have any day-to-day involvement in the running of the business. Given Mr and Mrs White may stand to benefit or be disadvantaged as a result of a decision which Council may make on this agenda item, I intend to leave the chamber and not participate in the deliberation or vote on this matter when it comes up on the 12th.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lansberg.
Thank you. I, Councillor Terry Lansberg, notify that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 8.3, development application, including a variation request to establish the Forest Glen Village Centre Plan of Development to be considered at the ordinary meeting on the 12th of November 2020, due to RPS Australia East Proprietary Limited is the planning consultant to this applicant in this matter. Mr Brad Williams is the General Manager, Planning and Development at RPS Group on the Sunshine Coast, and he is also a member of the Wyndon Sea Surf Club. Mr Williams has provided planning and development services to that club free of charge on matters that are unrelated to the development application that has been considered by Council. The declarable conflict of interest may arise because I am a member and also President of Wyndon Sea Surf Club. While the association with Mr Williams is remote of my councillor duties, This declaration is made in the event that a member of the community may perceive that I have a predisposition to supporting the work of this planning consultant. Given the remoteness of the association and that RPS Australia East Proprietary Limited is not the applicant in this matter before Council, but rather a consultant engaged by the applicant, I believe I can appropriately manage any perceived conflict, should it exist, and that I can impartially make a decision in the public interest on the matter before Council. At Council's ordinary meeting on the 12th of November 2020, I will request that the eligible councillors consider whether I have a conflict of interest and whether I may or may not participate in the decision for this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Natoli.
I, Councillor Joe Natoli, notified that I may have a declarable conflict of interest in item 8.3 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on the 12th of November 2020 due to the fact I was an employee of Canara Organic Marketplace prior to my election as the Division 4 Councillor on the 28th of March 2020. The nature of Canara's Organic Marketplace interests is that it is a business located in close proximity of the Forest Glen Village Centre Plan of Development. At Council's ordinary meeting on the 12th of November 2020, I request that the eligible councillors consider whether I have a conflict of interest on item 8.3 of the ordinary meeting of the 12th of November 2020, and if I do have a conflict of interest, whether I may or may not participate in the decision for this matter. In consideration of my declarable conflict of interest, I am of the opinion that I can participate in the discussion and vote on the matter, and in doing so, my participation will not lead to a decision that is contrary to the public interest. Further, I acknowledge the eligible councillors must, by resolution, decide my participation or otherwise in making a decision on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. No other councillors wish to make any declaration before we get on with the meeting? Okay, thank you. Item 4.1, the draft coastal hazard adaptation strategy. We have Dave Moore, Gillian Smith, Gary Duffy, Dr. Steve Scull here to make a presentation. Thank you, David.
Mr Mayor, councillors, the purpose of this report is to present the draft Coastal Hazard Adaptation Strategy and seek your approval to place the strategy on public display and commence community engagement. Our coastal environments include 60 kilometres of open shoreline consisting of beaches and rocky headlands, 70 kilometres of lower estuaries and extensive areas of riverine floodplains. Our coastal environments contribute significantly to our identity and lifestyles. Locals and tourists continue to admire the coastal landscapes and access the coastal environment to enjoy various activities. The coast is critical to the tourism industry, which is a significant part of our regional economy. Use and enjoyment of the coast is maximised when ecosystems are healthy and supported by appropriately located, designed and serviced parklands, paths, beach accesses and other supporting facilities. As we deliver a strategic and coordinated approach for the protection, sustainable use and enjoyment of our coastal environments, there is a need to respond to coastal hazards, which have the potential to impact on both the built and natural environments and the livability of the Sunshine Coast. Coastal hazards include open coast and shoreline erosion, and coastal inundation, which can be of a temporary nature associated with tides and storm tides, or permanent in relation to sea level rise. Coastal hazards, however, are not new, but as we plan for climate change, there is evidence to suggest that our current actions may not be as effective in the future, and that there is the potential for accelerated coastal erosion and increased impacts associated with rising sea levels, storm surge and king tides. Traditionally, governments and communities have sought to reduce the effects of coastal hazards through a range of measures, including land use planning, setting building and infrastructure design standards, and undertaking coastal management activities such as sand dune restoration, beach replenishment and protective works. Council's long-term strategic directions for the coast, as outlined in the Environment and Livability Strategy, includes a policy position that coastal hazard risks are known and avoided, or otherwise adequately addressed, forming part of long-term adaptation planning. The ELS also includes a transformational action, being prepared, which seeks to proactively plan for the potential impacts of climate change and natural hazards to build the resilience of the region. In response, a draft coastal hazard adaptation strategy has been prepared. The strategy is not a statutory document, but once finalised will guide and adjust our coastal management measures by providing a fit-for-purpose assessment of the social, cultural, economic and environmental risks associated with both current and future coastal hazards. As well as addressing risk, the strategy also provides for change management, as we collectively respond, plan for and adapt to the potential disruption and changing circumstances associated with coastal hazards. The CHAS will assist to inform planning and policy, asset design and delivery, project delivery, governance processes and financial management to ensure the impacts to our natural and built environments and the livability of the Sunshine Coast are minimised, a key part of achieving a climate-resilient community. Responding to coastal hazards needs to be done in partnership. And in 2016, the Queensland Government and the Local Government Association of Queensland announced the Q-Coast 2100 program, an initiative to facilitate consistent development of coastal hazard adaptation strategies by each coastal council in Queensland. To provide guidance and ensure a level of consistency across Queensland coastal councils, the program has established a set of minimum standards and guidelines, including an 8-phase strategy development process, seeking to identify areas likely to be exposed to current and future coastal hazards, understanding how climate change and coastal hazards affect coastal communities, local economy, natural environment, assessing the vulnerabilities and risks to council and community assets, developing potential coastal adaptation options, assessing the viability of adaptation options through stakeholder engagement and economic analysis, and informing the development and implementation of preferred adaptation options. To date, 31 of the 41 eligible coastal councils in Queensland are progressing the development of a coastal hazard adaptation strategy. As part of this funding, we've been successful in securing approximately $500,000, which has assisted in the development of the draft strategy. Everyone has a stake in the coast, and therefore through the development of the draft strategy, we continue to engage with the broader community to build a shared responsibility to respond to coastal hazards, a responsibility shared with other land managers and private landholders. Through engaging with the community, we have worked to collectively understand what the community values about the coast, share information about coastal hazards, explore what makes a resilient coast, and sought feedback to inform adaptation options. The development and subsequent implementation of a final CHAS demonstrates Council's strong leadership and the key role it has in ensuring that public assets are appropriately managed and maintained to enable ongoing functionality and accessibility. Initiatives in the draft strategy also seek to foster and enable other stakeholders to proactively manage coastal hazard impacts on their own land and assets, in accord with the strategy and also in consultation with Council. Community engagement undertaken to date has been critical, and it has underpinned the elements of a co-design approach for coastal hazard adaptation and the shared responsibility in responding to the emerging coastal hazard risk. To date, engagement has been comprehensive and has included social media, a project-specific webpage and direct engagement. We've had over 7,800 website views, 2,500 plus face-to-face interactions and discussions about the project, 2 community surveys receiving more than 1,200 submissions. An important component of the engagement, though, has been the establishment and running of an 18-member community advisory group who have guided the development of the draft CHAS to ensure community views and ideas are captured. The group has met on 6 occasions as a full group, and there's also been 6 other meetings of smaller subgroups to provide further input into the process. The independent chair of the community advisory group, Dr. John Martin, has affirmed his support to undertake public consultation on the draft CHAS through the preparation of the letter of support as part of the agenda paper, and he has also provided this short video message.
Well, the Sunshine Coast coastline is one of the major reasons why people come to live here, can see why it's so important that the state government and the local council, the Sunshine Coast Council, have got together to develop its coastal hazard adaptation strategy. And my role as the independent chair of the Community Advisory Group has been to work with representatives of the community, state government, industry groups, surf life saving and so on, to make sure that people understand what the issues are around coastal hazards to do with storms, tides, flooding and how those factors interact. It's not just sea level rise, it's the way in which those factors interrelate to tides, to sand drift up and down the coast, to flooding in the rivers and so on. And people will have particular interests depending where they live and how they actually use the coastline. So it's multifaceted. There's lots of ways to actually think about impacts on the coast, and therefore it's important that people get engaged in the conversation, understand what the issues are, and look to the future in ways in which they can actually make a difference as to how they live on the coast, and they can play their part to ensure we have a wonderful coastline going forward. This issue is a big issue, so I was honoured when the Mayor, Mark Jamieson, invited me to be the independent chair, to play a role of bringing people together to ensure that people understand what the issues are and to hear their voice. So that's what we've done. And the Community Advisory Group, all working all the way through COVID, you know, with Zoom meetings and so on, have done a terrific job, and together we've all learnt about those issues. So my role as the chair is to make that happen, to manage that process, and it's been exciting, interesting, and I believe successful. I'm supportive of the draft strategy because I have children and grandchildren. We love this place, and what's important for me and for my wife and for our family is that our kids and their grandkids have a future and have a beautiful Sunshine Coast. So we all have a vested interest in making sure that we have a great Sunshine Coast into the future.
Councillors, a key element of the draft strategy is the coastal hazard mapping for areas that may be prone to coastal hazards for open coastal erosion, tidal areas and storm tide inundation. It should be noted that the state government already maps areas across Queensland likely to be affected by coastal hazards at 2100. As a requirement of the QCoast 2100 program, Council has updated this mapping for our local government area context to comply with those requirements. Mapping is indicative only, but assists Council and the broader community to proactively plan for those areas across the Sunshine Coast that may be impacted by coastal hazards not just in 2100, but also today, in 2041 and 2070 in the absence of adaptation measures. The mapping will be available online in an interactive format, and this can be found at the project's Have Your Say website. In addition to the mapping, other key elements of the draft strategy that provide a proposed way forward include a region-wide risk assessment, providing greater insight on the timing and scale of emerging risk associated with coastal hazards, a draft coastal adaptation framework tailored for the Sunshine Coast, including Council's roles and responsibilities, and 3 adaptation responses: monitor, maintain and prepare, mitigate and transition, and the assignment of adaptation responses across the region for present day, 2040, 2070 and 2100 to guide region-wide and location-specific pathways and actions. 4 themes of adaptation options are also defined in the draft strategy: enhancing adaptive capacity, planning, modifying infrastructure and coastal management and engineering. Mitigating coastal hazard risk is to be achieved through the finalisation and subsequent implementation of the CHAS, to embed identified coastal adaptation responses into current and future operational planning, delivery and decision-making. By acting now, we can be better prepared to ensure our coastal areas are healthy and actively prepared to meet the needs and expectations of current and future Sunshine Coast communities. As the next step, we are wanting the community to continue to have their say on the development and finalisation of the strategy. From today, a 4-week period of public consultation on the draft strategy is proposed, with details available on the project's Have Your Say website. Working within COVID-safe requirements, the consultation will be a combination of online webinars, open house sessions and special interest briefings. The consultation will be promoted through social media and other communication tools. As we talk to the community, and if we're sometimes already asked how can we help, we'd love for them to provide feedback on the draft strategy, to continue to increase their awareness of coastal hazard-prone areas, to review proposed adaptation pathways, consider top tips for delivering resilient homes, and continue to contribute to the stewardship of our coastline by protecting our dunes and vegetation. Mr Mayor and Councillors, this morning we are seeking your endorsement of the draft strategy and supplementary materials for the purpose of public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr Moore. Someone prepared to move the report? Councillor Cox, thank you. Councillor Suarez, seconded. Thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Cox?
Certainly, Mr Mayor. I'll be very quick this morning because essentially we're just endorsing this to go out for public consultation. Our coastal areas, including our beaches, foreshores and coastal floodplains, form an integral part of our Sunshine Coast identity and our lifestyle. Council, through this strategy, is planning to ensure we continue to enjoy these areas and the activities they facilitate into the future. This means making sure our natural and built assets are in good condition, are designed appropriately, are resilient to climate change impacts. Being a well-adapted and resilient community is a long-term plan that requires ongoing effort by everyone, including Council. It's been a 2-year-plus journey to get to this point, and there have been hundreds of hours of input from many of Council's internal branches to our community advisory group, headed by Professor Martin, who we heard from earlier, and to our external consultants, Elisa and Steve, who's sitting here today. On page 10, as we've already heard of the report, it lists the extensive community engagement that this program has already had. And I'd like to think that after we endorse it here today, that the community continues to provide feedback through viewing it online, attending the webinars, or visiting one of the proposed open house sessions. I'd also, just while I can, I've got the floor, like to thank Dr. Dave Moore, Gillian and Gary for their specific contribution to this project. It's been an immense journey, as I said, over 2+ years now. 2018 it commenced, and the work that you guys have put in has certainly been appreciated and will leave a long legacy for our future generations here on the Sunshine Coast. So thank you. Councillors, and I look forward to your support.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Any other speakers? Councillor O'Prey.
Answer you. Thanks, Ed, for putting this up today. This is a wonderful draft strategy. I'm very proud of the work that the staff have done. I think you all should be very much congratulated on your years of work. I dare say it's actually longer than 2.5 years, Peter, because I know that the Professor John, who's come on board here as the chairman, actually started out with the MRECG group, which was the group that was originally put together to get community input to the council in regard to the sandbags at the Maroochy River mouth. So it's been going on for quite some time, Mr Mayor. I guess the big part here is the big question here is what makes a resilient coast and what makes a resilient coastline. For those that can cast your memory back to 2011, when there wasn't one grain of sand on the beach between Maroochydore and Alexandra headlands, it was actually devastating. It was pre-2012 elections when I came in, and it was absolutely devastating for our neck of the woods there, and not only just as our trophy cabinet, as one of the most beautiful parts of the Sunshine Coast, but also as a tourism and economic disaster, if you like, with not one grain of sand on the beach between Maroochydore and Alex. It's really hard to get the tourists to come here and get the sand between their toes and enjoy red wine and enjoy the Sunshine Coast. But what this really shows today is a lot more about the planning, the policy and the project delivery, which is I'm really excited about, and also the financial management of this. I think it's important that we also include that a lot more than probably what's happening at the moment. I think that the financial management of this and the protection of our infrastructure right up and down, particularly that Alexandra Parade stretch and the private properties that are on other parts of the coast as well. We also need to acknowledge and thank our partners, and particularly the Queensland Government and the Q Coast 2100. Look, I think it is around about just shy of $1 million they've put towards that. I think it's a significant contribution. Our local community groups that have stepped up and helped us with this. That's all the coast care groups across the coast, the surf lifesaving groups, the private landholders, but most importantly the community advisory group led by Professor John as well. I guess with that, the 3 points that I get out of this draft strategy is the risk assessments. All right, we need to know what's going on out there. We need to know where we're susceptible to big risk and big damage. The adaptation framework, so how do we adapt? How do we make sure that these things are done properly and informed and keeping the community on the journey as well? And then, of course, the responses. And that's probably the key thing. That's where we see the rubber hit the road. That's where we see the actions take place. All right, those responses are critical. We need to know what we've got to do in advance, well and truly in advance, how it's going to happen, how it's going to roll out, what it's going to cost, and what the community can do to help. So with that, I'd just like to again congratulate the staff, and I'd really like to endorse draft strategy to our councillors, and look forward to your support on this today. It's been a big journey, and I thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Question, if I may, for Dr Moore, and clearly echo the comments we've already heard into what an amazing piece of work this is, and to thank you for the draft strategy to help protect our coastline. But if we just, my question is, can you help us understand that this is not just about the 60 kilometres of coastline? So when we look at the mapping, it actually goes a fair way inland, and included in the adaptation strategy is the town of Yandina, which obviously experiences an impact due to the tidal impact on the river there. Could you just help us to explain the importance for everyone to get involved in this consultation, not just the people who live within a few hundred metres of the beach line?
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for that question, Councillor Law. The coast is an important asset, not just for the people that live on the coast, where they live, work and play, but it's an important asset for everyone that lives on the Sunshine Coast, and that extends to the people in our hinterland environments as well. While we might see coastal erosion at our beaches, there is the potential for coastal hazards to impact other areas, and that's when we look at inundation of a permanent nature as sea level rises, changes over time. And this does have the potential to impact further up our waterways onto our floodplains, which are flat environments. And it's also got the potential to impact through storm tides. So an east coast low or cyclone has that ability to push waters up and result in storm tide flooding impacting on what we know and how we live. So it is a broad area. When the community looks at the maps, they can see the extent that we're trying to manage here. And in that instance, I would encourage them, wherever they're living, whether it's in one of those areas or not, to have an understanding of what coastal hazards are, their potential impacts to the environment and livability on the Sunshine Coast, and be part of the process moving forward to ensure that we are prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Landsberg.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, David. Yeah, great report. Just reading through the report and reading through the shoreline erosion management plan and our SEMP, we will have some big decisions coming up in the future. And touching on the geotextile groins that we've already been using since 1995 at Maroochydore, and the cost involved in the difference with rock walls, do you see that to try and prevent that tidal surge up Maroochydore River? Because that's one of those key impacts that we see along Bradman Avenue there.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Landsberg, for that question. What the strategy does is just provides proposed adaptation responses. There are going to be a number of difficult decisions at certain locations, and I think at each time where we are trying to make decisions, whether it's on rock walls, groins and the construction materials, costs, etc., we do have to do that on a case-by-case basis, not only with the technical input from council officers, but also with conversations with the local community that may be affected as well.
And as I think they're probably the two most important areas, Golden Beach and Maroochydore River, and the impact of what we're seeing with tidal surge in the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the report, Dave, and thank you to everyone involved with the work that was done over the last 2 years. I'm grateful to be involved at the last minute. climate change is a global issue that's now fallen to the responsibility of local councils to address for their communities and for the environment. And the state mapping that's been provided, that's guided a lot of the work, the initial, impetus to this report, presents an absolute worst case scenario. It doesn't take into account what we actually have on the ground. A lot of our dunes already are vegetated, and that's one of the strategies that we're looking forward to in terms of enhancing our dunes to try and provide some protection. And the state mapping didn't take any of that into account. So I just wanted the community to be aware that that's that base case that we were given. And in fact, when I was at the Planning Institute of Australia Awards on Friday night, I spoke to Isaac Council, who actually challenged the state mapping in their area when they provided their CHASN, which they have just recently won an award for. Nonetheless, the work that's been done today is based on that worst case scenario. The CHAS has mapped areas that are prone to hazards, assessed the risks, created strategies to adapt to those risks. And the feedback from the community on this CHAS is, as Councillor Cox mentioned, very much encouraged and desired. Because it's not only how we adapt, how we manage our coastlines and what we do with our infrastructure, it's a guide to our future planning. And it's important that the community understand how our coastline and how our rivers, as Councillor Law also mentioned, will impact on our future planning decisions. So if you have an interest in planning for our coast, you need to understand these coastal hazards as well. And I strongly encourage the community to come and have their say, and I hope our councillors endorse this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor O'Prey, you have a question?
It's a question through you. Lots of praise here today. I'd just like to know where we sit. I note that you said earlier that there was 40-odd councils that are putting together a CHAS. Where are we situated? Are we ahead of the game here? Has anyone other than us completed or got through their draft stages yet?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's only 2 councils that have completed their CHAS, and that's Bundaberg and also the Douglas Shire. And there's a number of other councils that are in a similar position of going out for consultation, including Gympie and Noosa Shire Council as well, and Redlands. So we are, up amongst those top 6 councils that are progressing, their CHAS and going out to seek, have a conversation with their community.
Thank you. Well done and congratulations.
And it's perhaps just worth noting that the LGAQ obviously has been vitally involved in that and providing a lot of specialist staff as well. Not only the financial support through the state, but on the ground support also. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors and Dr Dave. I've read the documentation with interest, and I think that it's a really well presented and good plan for the future of our coastal region. The hinterland depends on the coast, and the coast depends on the hinterland. So we need to look after each other. And as such, although I don't have any coastal section in my division, I'm more than happy to support this proposal and the recommendations. Thank you.
God forbid we ever see any coastal areas in your patch, Councillor.
We may not.
Councillor Natali.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And councillors, I want to congratulate the council, the staff, Dr Dave. This is probably one of the most significant documents that this council and our community will face. Get your head around what the impacts. We live on the coast. We are called the Sunshine Coast. And we have a real connection to our coastal, our wetlands, our floodplains. We have to understand the dynamics of the system. Generally, most days it's going to be beautiful. We won't notice the impacts. But when the storms do come, that's when our community will feel the impacts. This incremental process of evaluating the risks and putting in strategies to be able to mitigate that over a 3-stage process towards 2100 is just an outstanding way of being able to get our community prepared It's not about panic. It's not about time to panic, but it's about understanding and being able to manage the risks ahead. And I hope that everyone in our community can take the opportunity to get a better understanding of what the strategy does mean. There will be decisions in the future that this council and future councils will have to make. There'll have to be major budget allocations to deal with it. And it goes right down from everything from stormwater management, population management, and just being able to manage the major economic drivers, our beaches, and making sure that there is sand on our beaches and that it can still be the major playground for our community, for those that visit our region, and it became and still maintains that major economic driver that we have. So thank you to everyone. I want to send this message to our community that I really want to urge everyone, to take a huge interest in this. It's significant, will impact ours, but our future, our children's generations, and it's important that they have some input into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. If there are no further speakers, I'll go to Councillor Cox to close. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and congratulations, councillors, on your input this morning. Just touching on something Councillor Law said earlier about the river impacts with those tidal inundations, and it has been mentioned a couple of times. Getting the entire community to understand the impacts are not just coastal erosion, they are sort of wide-ranging impacts, especially when we figure that the 2100-year time frame is going to have that sea level rise factored in as well. So, yeah, strongly encourage all of the community to have a look at this, have their say, and provide their feedback, because the storm tide inundation as well, people just aren't understanding what happens when all of those factors come together. So if there's one thing I can just urge our community, get a look, have your say, and understand and educate yourself as to this process, because as we've heard, it'll have impacts upon our future generations, but we want to make sure we're making good decisions and preserving the lifestyle and those natural assets into the future. So I'll be fully in supporting this today.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillors will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dave, and to the staff for your great work. Well done. Councillors, as that's our only item for today's special meeting, I'll declare the meeting closed at 9:53. Thanks very much.